Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larson. On this episode, I'm back with my famous co-host, Dr. Greg Bailey. If you didn't catch previous episodes with Greg, you should go back and listen to those. He's had incredible successes, not just as a ER doctor himself, but as an investor in biotech. He financed one of the top cancer drugs in the world called expedite that sold for $14.3 billion, and one of the top migraine drugs in the world called Nurtec that sold for $11.6 billion. He's got Biohaven, he's still a director of, that I looked up yesterday, I think was $3.2 billion on the stock market. And what I think is the most exciting is he's chairman at Juvenescence, that's trying to prevent us from getting the diseases that are killing us. Greg, thanks for doing this again. And why don't you introduce our great guest?
Thank you very much, Jess. I'm not actually sure the best way to describe Aaron, but I had the pleasure of being on his podcast, so I can tell you he does a very good podcast on health and fitness that you should check out. He also has a book on the area. He has worked with a number of people that the audience would know as far as athletes and celebrities, helping them with their fitness, movement, breathing. And so delighted to have you on, Aaron. And what did I miss that would be part of your resume and who you are?
So the reason that an athlete or someone would want to work with me one-on-one is I do a combination of manual therapy or body work and physical training, blend those two worlds. And then, with like some of the athletes that people would be familiar with, be like performance coaching, so that includes different types of supplementation and nutrition, and then like gadgets, incorporating frequency-based tools for expediting healing and things of the like, lifestyle, kind of like an overarching holistic lens on physicality and health. But my main depth would be actual manual therapy and physical training.
So, I think it's public knowledge now that you worked with Aaron Rodgers as he's rehabilitating. What's the key for our audience that you would say on how, if they sustain an injury, what they should do to try to rehab in the most efficient way?
Oh, I love that question. It depends on, if it's like an acute injury, like with Rodgers, he had a grade 3 rupture of his Achilles tendon. So it was complete rupture, complete disconnection. With that, he had a surgery that was helpful to allow movement quicker, which is very supportive. That surgery isn't excessively novel. It's been done thousands of times. I think the difference with why Aaron had, I believe, what would probably be considered the fastest Achilles rupture rehab, I would think it'd have to be in like the history of maybe the world, or at least sports, would be the blend of being able to move quicker. So the common tendency after an injury like that would be to put it into a boot for an excessive period of time. And then that's going to be promoting just stagnation, which is going to be slowing down the healing process. So for any person that has an injury, the fastest, most high leverage thing that you could do for it is promote circulation as quick as possible. So there's been the suggestion for a long time, the RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevation. The ice part of that has been debunked, even from the fellow that actually came up with it in the first place. So replacing ice with movement, anything that's going to be promoting circulation. So compression is fantastic, getting that old stagnation out of there. And then, elevation is something that's really supportive, doing like lymphatic drainage. So thinking of the body as a system of, it's a fluid system. So you can kind of take like your foot, think of it as like a river, and you want that river to be able to have passage up into the heart and up into the rest of the lymphatic system to be able to, in a healthy way, circulate the old gunk from that injury, the inflammation, all
That's
parts,
a technical term,
and be able to promote faster healing. So thinking of yeah, exactly. So thinking of lymphatic drainage would be something that'd be really supportive. So if you have a distal injury, something that's like away from the body, people could get stuck in focusing on just working on that specific area, and they're not recognizing that the way that area is going to be able to heal is actually globally be able to circulate through the whole entire body. So working up in the popliteal space, the space behind the knee, working up into the inguinal space, the space into the hips, working into the abdomen, making sure that the whole visceral area is clear for circulation, working up into the clavicle and the neck, the armpit. So first, promoting circulation. Anything you can do to promote circulation. Subtle movement, something we were doing with Aaron when he wasn't able to move, like right off the bat. We were using e-stim to promote muscular contraction. It's also helpful with the membrane health to be able to allow perfusion of fluids in and out. We were doing blood flow restriction is another, like e-stim and blood flow restriction are very accessible. There's anybody could afford, some basic version of that for the most part. The systems we were using are a little bit more expensive, but it's accessible to anybody for the most part. So blood flow restriction would be something you're putting cuffs up on the hips, cuffs up around the upper arm above the bicep. And that's also going to be promoting more circulation into that space, which also promotes production of various different growth factors that helps send the signal to the body that even though we're not actually mechanically moving that hard, from a physiological perspective, from like the actual blood is still getting the signal that, oh my God, we're working tremendously hard. We have this massive pump happening. We need to send the growth factors in order to promote healing faster. Sunlight is one of the major ones. Grounding, looking at the body as a bioelectric organism, not just like an object, a non-animate object. Like I think of the sunlight as like, it's like I'm promoting photosynthesis in the body. Like taking the sun into the body is going to be what's running the batteries of the cells throughout the body. Promoting sleep. If you're not sleeping well, like you need to, that's again coming back to growth hormones and all the different growth factors that promote your healing. You are breaking your body down, in like bro speak while you're working out, and you're actually building the body, or you're anabolic while you're sleeping. Hydration. There's a lot of things. I could just keep on rattling things off, but I should probably let you guys talk. But that's like a baseline, like promote circulation, do the basic fundamentals of healing that have been around for millennia. And then from there, we can start stacking on some of like the gadgetry and the hacks and the frequency type equipment.
The couple of things, in obviously your podcast, there's a documentary, I believe, about you helping to rehab Aaron. Is that correct as well? Coming out?
Yeah. The Deepak Chopra's son, Gotham. He's a really amazing, I don't know, is it a documentarian? He makes documentaries. Did the one on Conor McGregor, and he's had a lot of really, really cool ones. They were following along the journey. So I don't know when that comes out exactly, but probably I'd imagine sometimes like early to mid next season.
Which would be fantastic for the audience to sort of understand this. It's interesting how it's counterintuitive when you're talking about trying to expedite and accelerate flow, and yet you're restricting the venous blood out of a limb to speed because it tricks the body, as you talked about, into the arterial still getting in and is providing the nutrients. Is that an accurate appraisal for the audience?
Yeah. So it's what it's doing. So if you've ever worked out, you're going to experience the pump, like Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of made notorious in the Pumping Iron documentary. He has interesting comments of his why he loves the pump. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that reference. But if you're not able to train hard, you're not able to induce like strong muscular contractions because you're immobilized or partially immobilized, the BFR, blood flow restriction, can limit some of that venous return and will increase the actual engorgement of the muscle cells. And so it's sending the signal that we're working really hard right now, even though it's not actually from like what would typically considered, like a pump that you get from a normal workout. And so from a physiological level, you are getting the message that you're working out harder than you are. And it's a similar thing with applying e-stim to muscles while you're working. So if you're doing like a typical muscular contraction, suddenly you're compounding that times, a lot of repetitions through the pulses of the e-stim. So there's little ways to make it more. If you only have 30 minutes to work with somebody, or they have limited range of motion, there's simple little hacks and tools to make it almost like higher concentration training.
Jess, you were quite an athlete and probably still are, from you snowboarder, surfer, So I'm sure this has triggered a couple of questions for you.
Yeah, especially since I have hyperextendable joints and have had so many ankle sprains doing action sports, especially skateboarding, that I ended up tearing the tendons off my foot playing basketball on a rebound once.
Oh, wow.
And finding out the rice thing, that like I don't need the ice, that I can't believe I didn't know that had been debunked. So now I got to put that in.
Oh, really? Yeah, I think the doctors, if I remember correctly, his name's Dr. Merkin. And I think he came up with the rice, it's like sometimes in the 80s. And it was an ongoing thing. And then in the last decade or so, he's like, oh, yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, so, but like globally, getting your body cold, getting into a cold plunge or something like that, that's a different experience than acutely icing an injury. And icing an injury can be temporarily beneficial because of analgesics. It'll make you numb. And so if your sole intention is the short-term gain of, I just need to not have pain right now, ice can be really supportive. But if your intention is like, okay, cool, I've got, a week or a day or a month or some time, and my intention is actually for this to be able to heal as fast as possible, you could stifle some of that healing through further stagnating with the ice.
So Greg and I are doing a lot around not just inviting people to become investors in healthcare and biotech, life sciences, but also in like helping investors take their own longevity seriously. And so I'm interested, whether it's, one of the most famous quarterbacks in NFL history with multiple Super Bowl wins like Aaron Rodgers, or these like A-list actors who you go live on set with them, right, for months at a time, weeks at a time. When there are so many conflicting opinions in the world of fitness and health, and when there are a lot of people who have notoriety, what do you think it is that helps you gain trust with them? We're like, no, I want to hang out with this guy every day.
I listen. It's probably a big one. It's just that being, ultimately, if you're going to be with somebody. So with like Aaron, I lived with Aaron for, 5 months or so last year. And so being sensitive to the needs of somebody else, like over your own, or maybe with your own, you don't want to just be like a doormat. I am going out of my way to think of how I can be improving their life, so putting myself into their shoes, like actively with regularity, so trying to take myself out of my frame temporarily to place myself into the frame of another person, be like, okay, like what will be really supportive for that person? I am really I'm really effective with body work specifically, and integrating that with training. So being good, being able to produce results quickly. And I think there's that nothing's going to be trumping that. So first it would be like, if someone's a practitioner of something, putting your 10,000 plus hours in and being in obscurity and nobody knowing about you, and you making tons of mistakes, and you probably injuring people on the way, and, being like, oh shoot, like don't do that, injuring yourself along the way, like all of the problems when you're in obscurity, I think is an incredibly valuable thing. Like you need to put those repetitions in, and then just being incredibly confident with the results that you're able to produce quickly, and so that's something that I've been able to do consistently with anybody that I've worked with for the most part. If they have some type of issue happening, I'm incredibly confident that if you give me 30 minutes with them, I will be able to ameliorate that issue to some highly noticeable degree, enough to grab attention. And then along the way, the other, more like soft aspects of listening, making somebody feel comfortable, and making someone feel, see the potential in themselves. That's something that I think is an incredibly important thing. If people feel good around you or better around you, they'll probably want you to be around more often. If people feel worse about themselves around you, they'll probably want you to be, around less often. So navigating that kind of tightrope of how do I provide constructive criticism and coaching and support while I'm also not maybe being too blunt and like tearing this person down. Unless maybe I'm working with David Goggins, which I haven't. And for him, my approach would probably be very different. I'd probably be very much more like challenging, and very much more like quote unquote, like masculine, as people use terms like masculine and feminine a lot these days. So I'd be much probably like harder and much more driven and much more like structured and linear and quantitative and goal oriented. With somebody like Aaron's more into the metaphysical world, and Aaron enjoys using plant medicine, and Aaron enjoys, referencing astrology. And, so with him, it's something where it's like, okay, we want to have goals. He's also incredibly competitive, and he also, like, if something doesn't work, he's not interested. So it's finding that balance with each individual and being able to be flexible enough to speak their language. If you're not able to do that, you're not gonna be able to connect. So creating rapport with somebody as quickly as possible is going to be like the highest leverage tool any person could possibly do. And if you're doing it in like a snaky way, where it's like, okay, cool, I just read a book on neurolinguistic programming, and now I'm going to start like mirroring this person, or I'm going to anchor something, so, and I'm like, it seems like I'm doing a thing, like I'm doing a thing to sell. That feels super gross, so I think it's just time invested in the craft, time invested with, being with yourself, which I'm like definitely in process with. I have all sorts of stuff I got to work on, being authentic and honest with that. And yeah, listening just to somebody deeper than just what their words are. Sometimes people don't know exactly what they want yet. And so it's like providing a future for them that maybe they didn't even realize was possible. And sometimes the words that someone is speaking is actually different than the tone and the body language and the intonation behind the words. And if you, in a very safe way, can provide feedback in a non-judgmental way of what you hear at a deeper level than perhaps exactly the words, that can be very surprising to people. And people are like, oh, interesting. You're like, I want more of that because I want to understand. I think that's, it's very like high level, like meta type perspective. But I think that would probably be the reason for most people that they have clients like that.
Yeah, I think that's probably solid advice, no matter what kind of client you're working with, for anybody listening.
Yeah.
It's fun on the show to have so many different kinds of experts and then hear some of the things that are in common, regardless of what industry they're in. I've got another question before I hand it back to Greg, but before I ask that, will you tell people name of the book, name of the podcast? I know your YouTube channel is doing really well. I think maybe tell them what your courses are.
Yeah. Book's called The Align Method. Podcast is called Align Podcast. And YouTube is Align Podcast. Everything's Align Podcast. Instagram is Aaron Alexander. And yeah, the course, if people are interested in understanding their own movement patterns, which it's interesting. We grow up in a world that's inherently biased towards disintegration or disconnection. So most people, like even if you watch like a CrossFitter, which I think CrossFit has a lot of merit, it's better to do CrossFit than nothing at all, I would say. But people that are moving in more of a lens of like traditional bodybuilding, it's much more bilateral. We're working on like the sagittal plane only. We're not working like the body actually does in any type of sport. Anytime that you are walking or running or throwing or kicking or punching, or any aspect of actual human movement that's been around forever since humans have been bipedal, and even before that, if depending upon your belief system on evolution and such, we're still going through these spiral motions in order to get from point A to point B. So things seem like they're moving in straight lines, but what allows them to move in straight lines is actually rotation in spirals. That's what all the joints are doing at like a micro level. And so that's a big focus of mine with the Align Method program, and just things that I'm interested in promoting and sharing is kind of like rehabbing that sagittal movement, or sagittal bias movement, and bringing people back into the ability to be fluid in their movement. And what I was saying with the CrossFitters, if you see a CrossFitter do some of the traditional lifts that they do, it's really impressive. But then once they get in the water to swim, it's like, oh my God, like what is going on here? Then once they start running, it just seems kind of a little bit clunky. And so that to me, I think is a really interesting thing in order to reduce inflammation, reduce pain, any type of like chronic aches and pains and like wearing down up the joints. It's very important that you're able to find fluidity in the joints throughout the whole body and prioritize neutrality as much as you can as you're going through the whole entire range of motion. And the way that you do that is through emphasizing more like rotational contralateral meaning like opposite side movement. And so a big part of the program is first, the first week is a free week. So if people want to try that, there's a movement assessment to see where your movement is at today. And then we go through some self-care fundamentals, teaching you some techniques that will create change very quickly, which is great. And then from there, it moves into mobilizing all the joints throughout the body. So if you have limitation in the body, it's really important that you sort that out, because if there's limitation in the range of motion in the joint, what will happen is you'll end up having tissue dehydration in those ranges that you're not able to access. You have muscular inhibition. The body kind of shuts down. And so, it's like use an analogy of like real estate. So if you're in your house, you might only literally be living in like a small corner of your living room. And then you kind of go into like another little side of the kitchen and then a little edge of your bed. And you're like, dang, this house is so cramped. There's not enough space in here. It's like you're living in a mansion, actually. You're living like this amazing, genius, magical mansion. It's so fun and incredible. You just haven't occupied those broader aspects of yourself, because most of our lives are sitting in chairs. We're kind of hunched over, forward head posture, hyperkyphosis, and rolled forward shoulders. It's not a very like confident, proud position. It's not very supportive for communication if you're kind of locked up in your body, because we're always mirroring and mimicking each other and attuning to each other. So you're not going to be as expressed in conversation and communication and sales or whatever it is that you're doing. So bringing people back into occupying the entirety of their body, which is something that everyone has a right to do, I believe. I think most people would believe that. That's a big part of what the program is. So the first week of it, if people are interested in exploring any of that, that's Align. You probably have a link, but alignpodcast.com/AMP, Align Method Program. And people could try the first week if they want to check it out. And then the Align Method book is, the book version of all of that stuff.
Very cool. Greg, what other questions do you have for Aaron?
Two questions, actually. I think you maybe consolidate the answer.
Ask me about my calves. I have great calves.
That was exactly where I was headed. The question I had is,
they're real.
How many people subscribe to this theory that what you were just espousing? So is this like a common thing amongst people who are helping with people with body movement, physiotherapists, orthopods, podiatrists, or are you pretty unique in how you see the world physically? And then if you contextualize that against the concept of what should our audience do rather than wait to injure themselves, what should they be doing proactively, which probably consolidates what you just said in your print. So to prevent me from having an ankle injury, a knee injury, are there specific things I should think about that, or is that covered in the book? And as I said, is what you espouse
it's what I'm
very well adapted to a lot of people.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It's also simultaneously like somewhat esoteric. I think the limitation is people not really having a lot of autonomy and agency in what it means to move effectively. Like how many people at home sit on the couch really have a good sense of how to, like, they feel confident that they can get up and pick up a 250 pound box off of the ground, or 200 pound box, or 100 pound, depending on the size of the person, and be like, I know emphatically that the positioning of my joints and the pressure dynamics that I'm creating, which is very simple to actually be able to sort once you kind of have a very small amount of guidance, is as maximally efficient to reduce the likelihood of injury and increase my production of force or power. Like I just know that that's what I'm doing right now is as efficient as it can be. And efficiency, same thing. It's like if you have a business, it's like my business running as efficiently as it possibly can. For you guys, you know a lot about business. So you could look at somebody else's business and like, oh my God, you have so many inefficiencies in here. Like there's so much low hanging fruit that you're just not even able to see with the eyes that you have. So that being able to just create maximal efficiency in picking a heavy box up off of the ground, or even picking like a pillow up off of the ground, that's for the most part in the physical therapy world and in the training world. Most of that is pretty well agreed on. Getting into prioritizing movement that actually looks like human activities, running, walking, jumping, throwing, kicking, punching, things of the sort. That's also pretty well recognized as like really important. The broader question is, if someone has been sitting in a chair since they're in kindergarten, and they started off before that, they were this incredible, dreamy creature that was putting poop into their mouth and tasting everything and climbing trees and jumping into a pile of leaves. And, it's this proprioceptive storm. Like every day they're just going out in the world and they're just feeding information into their body. That's the way that the body naturally grows. If you look at the human developmental patterns, and you're starting off and, you're laying on your back and then you're rolling onto your belly, and then you're reaching out for something that you desire, reaching out for a bottle, you're reaching out for a trinket, something you find interesting. You naturally figure out how to do that. And the way that you do that is through these kind of rotational spiral type patterns. Then getting up and crawling. Like, what is crawling? Crawling is the same exact thing. Getting up, and then finally you sit back, and you maybe sit back on your butt, and then you get up into a squat, and then you finally stand. And then from there you start to walk forward a little bit, and then you fall. And like that's human. Like that's what the human does. And you keep on doing that throughout your life if you're not impacted by the industrial, modern, technological age that we live in. So then you take that magical proprioceptive lightning storm that's transpiring for that first 4 or 5 years of your life, and then you sit into a chair. And then from there, you start subtly creating this shortening and inhibition and hyperactivation of the opposite sides that are of the muscles that are inhibited. They kind of get stuck into those positions. And a part of what's a bummer on top of a lot of aspects of that, mentioning the lymphatic system, which is going to be foundational for so many different forms of dis-ease that a person might be experiencing, and they don't even realize it. Might have chronic pain, they might have some type of skin issues, it might be, a lot of different things can be transpiring because your body is just kind of toxic. It's not able to circulate well. You have the highest concentration of lymphatic glands in the aspects of your body that naturally produce the most movement. And so those glands exist, like I mentioned in the beginning, they exist in the knee, they exist in the hip, they exist in the shoulders, they exist in the neck. And a third of the lymphatic glands that you have in your whole entire body are located right up in the shoulder neck area, because it's trying to clean all of that fluid. Ultimately, it means probably to protect the brain, I'd imagine. So if you are walking and moving your body, you can think of your spine kind of like a rag. Every time if you want to get some gunk out of a rag, the most effective way to do it is you're going to twist that rag. That's human evolution. Our cells have been evolving for however freaking long, or God made it that way, whatever, in order to have these rotational patterns actually heal and replenish the cells with new fluid. So every time you're taking that walk, you are going through this spiral rag rinsing motion with all of your organs and all the lymphatic glands. And if you put the body into stasis or stagnation, and you're closing and contracting those spaces, the body inevitably will become backed up. So then the bigger question is, what is the most effective way to bring the body back into that natural human movement, walking, running, all the different things. And it can be a very supportive way to start off in a more isolated training modality and say, okay, these muscles are inhibited. Let's, in a isolated way, we're going to do some exercises to bring this back online. And it's too complex for you to actually throw a football right now, or throw a baseball, or do something that's more of a global dynamic complex movement. So we're going to start off and just strengthen in a myopic way some of those muscles in order to allow you to get into those positions. And then eventually, ideally, a good chunk of your training would look, instead of just doing like bilateral squats, maybe start incorporating more like lunging into that, or you do like a kickstand lunge type thing and kind of bring your body back into a position that would actually mimic life. So the process of how to get a person back into those positions could vary from person to person. That would be like depending upon the practitioner you're working with. But the idea of getting you into those positions, and those positions being the most valuable positions you could possibly get into as a human being, there's not a lot of people that are like naysaying on that.
Thank you. Jess, what do you got?
Well, I think maybe, I know we're closing in here. Maybe I'll turn the tables and ask my last question to you, Greg. As a medical doctor and an investor, thinking about the idea of like motivating more investors who maybe have been doing a lot of sitting for 10 or 20 or 40 years, listening to everything Aaron shared with us today, being a medical doctor yourself, what's maybe one thought that you have for an investor who's listening to this day, who's saying, yeah, I do want to get more of this transverse motion. I do want these spiral motions. I want to start doing some of this stuff like Aaron, but are maybe feeling less confident because it's been years or decades since they were that athlete?
Quoting Gandhi, every journey starts with the first step. And I think, Aaron's comment about communication and so just understanding that you can initiate, you don't need to lift the 250-pound box off the floor to start. You can start with the 20-pound box, and I love the concept of once again mimicking, natural motions, which is why, the Chinese, when they're doing their various movement exercises, is probably fantastic, I would think. But Aaron can correct me if I'm offbeat on that. With Tai Chi, and so, I think that too much, particularly investors, because they're are very busy business people. They tend to go, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to ride the bike, I'm going to lift the weights, I'm done. And at least with riding the bike, at least they're getting some sort of natural motion. But you really need to create a much more variety in the exercises you do, and because all of us think in terms of being time constrained, which is why the CrossFit and the high intensity have been so popular, because it's time sensitive. But no, it's much more what Aaron's talking about. Aaron, do you agree with how I'm thinking about this?
Yeah. And as we're talking, as you're mentioning, I'm like, oh crap, you're right. We're talking to probably mostly, investors that want to keep investing and live lives where they're just not in pain and they're able to be more effective with their families and, their companies and things of the like. The things that I think are the most valuable for a person that doesn't really care that much to go super deep in like the movement Kool-Aid realm, and they just want things to have like a baseline of like working better and just feeling good in their body. One of the biggest issues that we have is we're like excessively domesticated creatures. And one of the most healing things that we can do for our body is literally just like take your body outside more often. And so that would be something that if I were a person that is, which I am a person like this, it just happens to be like my brand and my life is based around these things, so it's convenient. But if I were a person that I was a, angel investor or something, and I was, most of my life was kind of inside, I was on the computer a lot. There are ways to bring outside inside. So things that a person could do with that would be, one, just get a pull-up bar in your house. Like that's like, if you're like, take anything away from this conversation, forget everything I said before, all of it's too complex and fancy, you don't care, just get a pull-up bar in your house. And if you walk through a doorway, a common place that you and your family walks through, just have a challenge for yourself of, I'm going to just do a little 10-second hang off of that pull-up bar. And then maybe give yourself, for a quantitative goal, because people less probably care about quantity and measurement, commit to 90 seconds total of hanging each day. If you care about the quality of your breathing, which your breathing is directly tied into your autonomic nervous system. So if you're a person that's chronically breathing up into your chest and up into your neck, maybe you're having sleep issues, maybe you feel anxious, Maybe, you might be taking some types of medications to remediate that. Something as simple as starting to just open up the space around your ribs is going to allow you to be able to bring your diaphragm online. If your diaphragm is coming online, that's your main breathing muscle, then suddenly you're able to every breath that you're taking, the company that is your biology becomes so much more efficient, because you're able to actually get finally, for the first time in maybe a very long time, you're able to actually fill those lower lobes of your lungs up with air. So suddenly it's like, wow, I feel like this new spurt of energy just because I'm finally breathing. A person, if you care about vanity, outside, like a good looking body for the most part, like a healthy looking body, oftentimes is like a well circulated body as well. Your shoulders, if you have rolled forward shoulders, protracted, rotated, all those different things, you have forward head posture. I mentioned all of that whole lymphatic system is right up in that space. You're chronically crimping down that lymphatic system. And so something as simple as just a decompressive hang is going to allow the sewage system and the waste management system of your whole entire body to come in and say, okay, cool, we're cleaning the body. This feels so good. You've had this massive pile of trash sitting, filling up your garage, filling up your driveway, and it's so much. Just doing that simple thing is going to be something that like very, very quickly, like it's absurd how quick some of this stuff can be, will suddenly be like waste management comes and we start to clean all that stuff up. Now we have more spaciousness in the body. Back to the vanity part, if your shoulders are rolled forward, you will, and you don't actually allow it to go through that full range of motion and that decompression and traction, then the shoulders will start to actually get stuck in that rolled forward position. And something as simple as hanging will start to open up some of the space in the shoulder joint, the glenohumeral fossa, and then there's the head of the humerus. It'll get stuck in that position if you're in that roll forward position too long. Something as simple as just hanging will open up that entire girdle. So now suddenly your shoulders can kind of start to like sit back, and wow, you look a lot more confident. And wow, you're actually getting taller because you're regularly tractioning your body, and you were collapsing. Now, just that simple intervention, and there's a whole entire book by a guy called Dr. John Kirsch, who's an orthopedic surgeon that worked, largely with shoulders. And people come in, shoulder impingement syndrome, they have chronic pain, they have issues, and then they just gave them this protocol of just hang for 90 seconds a day. And from what he said in his book, Healing Shoulder Pain, he was able to cure 99% of the people that he worked with through a very simple hanging protocol. So that would be something. Yeah. It seems like you want to say something.
I think this is a great place to end. I think that pull-up bars on Amazon are about to start selling a lot more right now. So
yeah. So it's like $30. So it's a very small, simple intervention. And another thing to go, and we probably need to wrap up, but another very small thing that people could do is just spend a little bit of time on the ground each day in your house. So throw a yoga mat down on the ground, get like a really comfortable rug, get some floor cushions, hang out with some kids who don't have most of these diseases that would manifest in like an adult body yet, and just observe what they do. And what they'll probably do if they see a chair, they might sit on the chair temporarily, but they're going to twist and turn, and they might squat on the chair, and they're going to like use it for all these different odd methods of using a chair. But for the most part, they're going to be laying on their side on the ground. They're going to be crossing their legs. They might go into like a straddle position with their legs. What you're doing with that, cultures that spend time on the ground with regularity, so like Northern Africa, Eastern Mediterranean, throughout Asia, they have minimal to no incidence of osteoarthritis in the hips and the knees. They're able to actually just take those the capsules of the joints and all the connective tissue around the joints through a regular range of motion. So that connective tissue is regularly nourished just as a product of the life that they're living. So if you would just get up and down off of the ground, that's the number one leading reason for elderly needing assisted living is fall risk. You eliminate that. That goes away. Like the adult diaper industry is exceeding that of the baby diaper industry. So we're because of the way that we're moving or not moving our bodies, we're actually starting to inhibit the muscles and the pressure systems that allow continence, allow our bodies to be able to like hold the fluids. So something as simple as just if you just hang off of a bar, spend a little bit of time on the ground each day, take meetings walking outside, ideally, so you're getting sunlight on your body. Start to invoke like a little bit of movement, inject a little bit of movement into the way that you are living in your day-to-day life as you're doing your business, it will have a massive impact compared to getting a gym membership, getting a trainer, not changing anything about your life, but doing these small bursts of exercise 3 days a week with a trainer, and then going back to all the same stuff. So looking at from a longevity perspective, looking for like an investment perspective is something that has, it's like gold compared to, I don't know, Bitcoin maybe. I like both. I like both, but gold will probably have some level of consistent value forever. Real estate have some level of consistent value forever. Something that's like a newfangled type thing, like it might be really valuable, it might be really amazing and fun and lead to short-term results. Who the heck knows what it's going to do in 20 years? The fundamentals of moving well are not going to go away. And the fundamentals of just taking your body outside with more regularity, the fundamentals of, connecting with your family and your friends and all that stuff, is not going away. So I would like double down on that stuff and then maybe put like 10% of your portfolio into the fancy, fun, crazy things.
I love it. Well, thanks for spending so much time here today. I feel like you've been able to talk about a bunch of accessible things, and it's like the more I hang out with Greg, the more I keep thinking about this stuff and like wanting to take it more serious myself. So like I've taken a lot away from this. Greg, anything you want to leave people with today?
Cool.
No, this was excellent. Aaron, thank you very much for joining us, and certainly opened my eyes. I was twitching in my chair, trying to breathe through my diaphragm.
Good.
And do some spiral movements. So
I love that.
Thank you very much.
That's good.
Yeah. Breathe through your nose. Emphasize long exhalations.
Love it.
Do that. Hang off of a bar, get up and down off of the ground. Start with that. See how you feel in a few days, and then we'll build off of that.
That's great. Okay, thanks everybody for listening. Bye now.